really excited at the chamber about working with the observatory. The new building is, we got a tour of it yesterday. Whatever you've got in your head of how the new building's gonna look, it's way cooler than that.
I agree.
And I say that without the slightest bit of worry that I'm overselling it. And I don't know if you got any shots of that kind of stuff or.
Sure, so hang on a second.
But, you know, the main thing is the relationship between the observatory and the chamber, which started with Arlene and continues with Jonathan Lewis in the lead, and all of us just being as supportive as we can, I think is really gonna bear fruit when the new building opens. You know, we all love the observatory. Yeah, there you go. Speaking of the new building.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's what's up there now. That's not an artist rendering.
No, it's real. This is
That's
pictures.
real. That's what
I
we're.
took this in the parking lot on my phone. This is not
Those
even
are building materials that are in the front.
burned wood. Yep. You know, I have a sample of it. Maybe we could pass it around at the end of the show. I have a piece of that in the back. So.
It'd be fun. You know, the genesis of this, if you don't mind, do you want to do the history or do you want me to do that?
Oh,
real
please
quick?
do. Do your thing.
You know, in the early 90s, State Parks did a master plan for the observatory. It literally sat on a shelf until Senator Honeyford called them up, what, 5, 6 years ago at this point, maybe even less than that.
It was about 6 years ago,
Yeah.
right when I came on.
Yeah, and said, I want to do something for the observatory, what do you got? They actually found it in their files, sent it over to the state senate, and he put $5.6 million, say $6 million into it, which has led to a complete rebuilding of the telescope, which I'm not qualified to talk about, but I know someone who is. You know, they've completely torn it. I mean, this is all that's left of the original structure. I mean, the original observatory dome, and when you're in the room, it looks like it used to. Everything else is gone, and that's a 150-seat auditorium there. It's going to have 3 massive flat panel screens in it. You know, just more than you could hope for a, you know.
So let's do the before and after. So here's the old structure. Here's the new one. And as Dana mentions, we retained the original south dome, but we've constructed a facade around it. Not just for aesthetic continuity with the new building, it also protects the brickwork. This was the only part of the building that was brick, and we noticed that the bar was rusting, so we wanted to preserve. There was water ingress, so we wanted to kill that while we still could. So the building's almost 50 years old, and we're getting close to that magic historic building.
Right,
Yeah, so it might include money.
What do you do with the outside space between the old and the new?
Storage. It's an empty negative void.
The parking lot's getting completely redone, but again, I'll let Troy talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're trying to do on the chamber side, you know, Nicole and Troy work actively on the website. We kind of pick up the tab for the website because it gets us out of a whole lot of, it's easier to make modifications if it's a chamber-owned website, and that's worked out really well. You know, we recently got a $10,000 grant from the Port of Seattle to market the observatory for astronomy tourism, which we're actively, you know, we discovered there was such a thing a couple years ago when a bunch of 2 busloads of Japanese tourists showed up in Goldendale after the eclipse. And we're sort of like, well, that's interesting. Turns out there's a firm in Japan that sends people to eclipses all year long. And we're like, oh my God, there's international astronomy tourism. We should figure that out. So we're doing that. We're in the process of putting together what will be kind of a loop tour. The Port of Seattle spends money because they want people coming through SeaTac. So the idea is that we would market to people outside the area, put together a loop tour that would come down from Seattle, Ellensburg, probably go out to LIGO, the gravity wave people on Hanford Reservation that got a Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. Absolutely fascinating facility. I met with them and the people that run the B Reactor Museum a couple of weeks ago. And what we're hoping is we'll have a 2 or 3 day bus tour for our astronomy tourists that will go out there, come here to Stonehenge, and then go up to the observatory for an overnight stay. And it's the overnight stay when you're in the tourism business that you absolutely have to get, because that's where the real tourism revenue comes from, is an overnight stay. And the observatory's always been our best way of getting there. We've now got this magnificent building that we're just going to market the heck out of. And we're real excited about the next couple of years. And when you see what the building looks like, you will be too.
Yeah. So,
And again, thanks for being here. Yeah.
What kind of plans are being made for the actual opening?
Good
kind of a
question.
celebration type situation?
Well, you know, we're thinking about it a lot, we don't have a date yet. You know, the original opening date was September. Looking at that building yesterday, I think they're way ahead of schedule.
Oh, yeah, they'll say they're not, 'cause they're very modest, but yes, I would
Yeah,
argue
they-
they definitely are.
I think, so what we're really shooting for is to have this Seattle money to market outside the area. So we've got a capability that we didn't used to have just because we got the money to do it. We're gonna, of course, just flog it to death locally. And, you know, for instance, we had someone from the Seattle Astronomy Club here yesterday who's closely tied to Rose City. And I'd like to think that OMSI will take an interest in this. But, you know, certainly in the amateur astronomer community. And what we're really, really excited about is our state representative, Jamie Herrera Butler, just got on the House Science Committee. And she's on the subcommittee that funds STEM education. And she's very, very interested in women in STEM programs and has asked us to come up with something that she can be a part of. So a whole bunch of pieces have sort of come together, partially by design and partially by just good luck. And we're really hoping that we can fully realize the young budding astronomer dimension to this whole thing through STEM and a real focus on women in STEM. Because it's sort of the middle school age person who becomes a scientist when they walk in a place like this, see the big telescope, hear Troy's presentation, and from that point in their life, they're a scientist. You know, that's who we really are after. You know, some percentage of kids who 20 years come back later with a PhD or a postdoc in astronomy that said, gee, it all started here. That's, if you had to go the mindset that I'm really, you know, just kind of enthralled by, that's it. You know, the tourism part's great. It's definitely the chamber mission, it's the parks mission. But if we get some percentage of the kids that we run through this place coming back on, this is where my science fascination started. You know, that makes everything else secondary in my book. And that's why our outreach is what it is.
Hey, David?
Yeah.
Does the grant come with parameter stipulations as far as how it's spent?
Well, you know, I had to put in some, you know, how are you going to spend our money type stuff. And it begins with a, you know, really finding if we're right, that there's kind of a subset of tourism that's astronomy tourism.
Okay.
Find those people. You really market research. If
It boils down to hotels and gas.
well, I mean, finding the people that are actually putting together astronomy tours is step one.
I got you.
We've got enough money in the grant that we could potentially bring a couple of them here, you know, do what they call a familiarization tour. Everybody calls it a FAM tour. I finally found out what FAM means. Had to embarrass myself to death and ask in a group setting. But so you know, we're putting together like a poster that would embody this idea of, you know, LIGO, which is absolutely fascinating. They haven't really marketed themselves at all, but they've got a marketing person now. You know, sort of the Tri-Cities element of this whole thing at the Hanford B reactor, which is I think called the Manhattan. So it's a.
Because it contributed to the enrichment of the material.
You're right.
That was long.
A place that you would have been shot if you tried to get into 35 years ago, it is now a national park. Interesting. And then, of course, Mary Hill with Stonehenge, and then
There's a direct pipeline to SeaTac to here.
Right, and pulling in people from outside the region.
Yeah. All
So
right.
that's the real goal, is to do the market research, bring some people in, have a logo that you put together, and have a loop tour that's well defined.
Branded, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks.
You bet.
Branding, I like that word branding.
Yeah,
I think it needs that.
it's very ranchy.
I like logos and things.
Yeah.
Dana, you mentioned that the 50th anniversary is coming up soon. What year would that be?
So 1973 is when the building was finished, October of 73. So if you do the math, that would give you 50 years would be 2023.
23?
Yeah, so we're not far from 50. The telescope is over 50. The telescope was built in the 60s.
Yeah, it was like, what, 68 or
It
something?
started way back in the mid-60s, and then it took 6 years to
I'm
make
gonna
the
let him do the
telescope.
rest.
Okay.
That's enough of me.
Okay, all right. So, well, thanks for letting me talk at you folks. I do that a lot here, and I'm always happy to talk about our exciting project. I've been here 6 years, and 5 of my 6 years have been really dominated by this project, for good and bad. And so I'm very, very excited about it finally coming to an end in a positive way. Although I will argue that it's not completely finished, because there was the word setback's a little bit strong. We didn't get the ramp that we wanted funded to get up to the roof. But I don't know if you've heard, there was a rooftop deck, which is pretty great. So let me go back to that picture. Here's the building, and then check it out, rooftop deck. The building was designed to be strong enough for that deck. And the deck is huge. You could easily fit 200 people up there, no problem. It elevates you so you get above the trees, and it improves the view even better of the scenery. It gives us a large area to collect everybody, because one problem the facility always had in the past was that all the standing areas were too small. So on a summer night, we'd have literally 150 people or more. They couldn't all fit in one spot, so they're kind of all over the place, and the staff are herding cats, kind of running around. And it worked out. People had a good time, but it's just, we could do better if we had a way to consolidate everybody. So that's important to us. So the ramp was not funded. We hope that it will be either in a supplemental ask, because we can do supplemental requests, or I don't say this as a state employee. It would be cool if someone stepped up, or someone's plural, and paid for it privately. So it would be neat if we could get donations. I can't go solicit them, of course, but it would be wonderful if we could secure some kind of relationship with someone who wants to help us build it. Frankly, I don't care what the ramp looks like at this point. I just want to get up to the roof. And so it doesn't have to be as grandiose as some of the drawings that we have. This is the old design where it was going to wrap around the south dome. The architect actually prefers a new design where it goes way out here and then back, and it really does look fantastic in the drawings of it. So either way though, we don't currently have the ramp. So I just wanted to be aware of that. You all to be aware of that. And that does bring up a question. I wanted to ask your opinion about something. We talked about a grand opening. Is it okay to do a grand opening without the roof deck? What do you think? Yeah, and then a second, yeah, a soft opening, and then another opening, you know? I guess my question is, what's the more important opening? Is it the first opening or the second one?
It's the facility.
Yeah.
The facility is the key.
I'm inclined to agree, and so, hey, Randy Gallen, Ranger Gallen is here. Now we have 2 state employees here.
Hey, it's the telescope. That's the key thing. That's just cross-utilization.
Yeah, people really want to see this facility open, you know.
I agree, including me. So,
I do have a question. As they're building this, the membrane, the support structure, et cetera, is built into the building so that...
That's why.
It's just access, and beyond that. Gotcha.
and that's why I think it's going to happen. Because you say, yeah, we spent millions of dollars to build a building ready for a deck that we can't get to.
Right.
It's an easier ask to say, hey, let's get to the deck. Than to say, well, we hope the building's strong enough, we'll see what happens, we might have to reinforce it. No one's going to do that, it's going to be crazy. So it has large steel beams. There's actually a large girder that looks like something of an office building that runs essentially what we call the semi-major axis of the ellipse, and that supports it. Also the drainage is designed for that, and also the HVAC has been designed to not cause a noisy roof environment.
Okay.
So it's all designed around that deck. So
Is the deck sunken enough that railing is already part of the building?
yes, the facade you see here is kind of a wall, and I actually do have pictures of it. So let me show you.
The building is the railing.
Yep. And I thought it was too tall. Let me show you.
Oh,
Here's a picture of the roof. This is a panorama. It doesn't really do the size of it justice. It really does feel huge when you're up there. But the walls felt so tall, I felt like I was in a prison. But then they showed me that, well, the thing is, this is without the roof material on it.
Right.
With all the insulation, and I know because I've been up there with the insulation now, it's over a foot of insulation and other materials. So now it's essentially it's at the correct standard height for a guardrail, is the idea.
So 36 inches, 36 to 40.
I don't know the exact amount, but I know it's in code.
It was designed to be okay.
Right. Now you might notice something here.
Hard winter.
You can no longer see this circle or oval because of the roof material that's up to it. But then you see something else here. Does anyone know what that is? I'm kind of excited about this.
Rear solar telescope?
So let's go back in time a few months. I'll show you a picture of the building when we first started doing the foundation work. See this pillar? Notice it has its own foundation. That's going to support, we always say the solar telescope, but really it's not just that, but it's our north dome. You might recall the building, we used to have a smaller dome. That was torn down. And we intend to put it back up or do a third dome because we're going to be reconstructing the north dome immediately next to the building. We might just leave that the way it is and then put a third one on the roof. So we intend to put a telescope on the roof, and I'm kind of excited about that. You say what kind of telescope? Oh, so let me show you the, just in case you guys are wondering what we're talking
So
about
was
here.
the old dome saved?
Save?
Saved, did you
The south
actually
dome?
save?
We saved the dome, we didn't save the horrible thing that was standing there.
I thought they were demoing it.
pop can.
Yeah. It crumpled like one too, and we ripped it out, yeah, so. I actually have video of this demolition, but I don't have it handy. Just give me 1 second though, because I do want to show you something about that. So, oh yeah, so those of you who don't know what we're talking about, this is the dome we're talking about, that little guy. So, which some people thought was an outhouse, which always offended me, so I'm glad it's gone for that reason. It won't resemble one. We are essentially going to recreate it though, adjacent to the building, and then temporarily. But I have a feeling, and actually I hope it's one of those temporary structures that becomes permanent because it's there, you know. Because one thing we did lose in this project was storage. We used to have a big storage shed, and that's been deleted. I have to tell you that none of us really wanted to lose the storage, but the site does look beautiful without that shed because the shed was so big it blocked your view of the east. And now there's this beautiful unobstructed view. The shed we're talking about is over here. And now that that's gone, you have this beautiful view of the eastern scenery. We also deleted the projection wall. You might remember what we like to jokingly call the Great Wall of Goldendale. That's been deleted. So that also blocked the view. So now we have a much better scenic view. But essentially, it went back to the way the place looked back when it was first built, because those structures didn't exist when the place was first constructed. So.
Have you found use to repurpose old assets?
Well, yeah, so the most famous asset is the big telescope, of course, which we've upgraded. I'll show you some pictures of that in a second. In the short term, I do intend to reuse this telescope I was showing you. I'm not really happy with the mount, but it does its job. This is our solar telescope, and that's why Jonathan referred to it as a solar dome, because we did a lot of our solar astronomy in there. I'm probably in the short term going to use that, and then hopefully we'll find some money to buy something better in the not too distant future, yeah. But yeah, so the answer is absolutely yes. And also gadgets and gizmos, a lot of computers and screens, like this screen, for example, we're going to reuse this. Although, you know, Andy, now that it's living here in Stonehenge, it's going to be sad to rip this TV out of here because there's going to be a big blank wall here. So we'll have to put like a painting up or something. Or maybe leave it and get another one. So,
42-inch over there.
yeah, really. Exactly. Speaking of old assets, I think it's 46-inch, but that Sony over there was bought in 2006, and that was the classroom TV for a while. And it's kind of migrated around, so our TVs move a lot. We try to not waste expensive gadgets whenever we can. We try to reuse them. So. That's a good question. Any other questions about that?
Just as far as just at a fundamental level, wood, metal, glass, you know, those types of things, are they being reused in the new project?
Oh, you know what's funny? One thing, you might not have heard this, Andy, this just came up at the last meeting. Some of the landscape plan entails aggregate crushed material, and we're actually gonna, here's the new parking lot, by the way. We're actually gonna crush up the old parking lot for that purpose. So we're not gonna truck it away. So we're gonna try to reuse as much of the old sidewalk concrete and concrete blacktop as possible. So that's nice. You can say it's original. That rail you're standing on is original. It goes all the way back to 1970. Amazing. Yeah, incredible. Yeah. Now, one part of the project that I do like to talk about a lot is the telescope. The telescope was first tackled in phase 2, which was essentially the first phase because, as you mentioned, the phase 1 languished. You know, they did that study in the 90s. A lot of people don't know, there was some work done in phase 1. They did some upgrades to the bathrooms, and also they built that great wall I told you about, the projection wall, but for the most part, there wasn't much done in phase 1. So from my experience, because it was the first one I came in on, phase 2 was the first phase. And in phase 2, we did indeed decide to do some work on the big telescope. So here's the way the telescope looked for its whole existence. You may have heard, Andy's got the loudest voice in the world. You may have heard that
We're closing out.
we didn't just put a new mirror in the telescope. Before that, does anyone here know what we did to the telescope? Before we put a new mirror in, we converted it to a Newtonian. So, using the original mirror. So let's go over the difference. This is a little telescope science lesson. That telescope over there, that black one there, that's a Newtonian. By the way, please don't get this wrong. Who invented the Newtonian reflector? Oh no, you're not answering quickly enough. Newton, thank you. This guy. Yeah. So I have a copy of his telescope in my desk here. Newtonian reflectors are very simple devices. They only have one curved surface, the primary mirror. The secondary mirror is flat and it bounces light out. That's not how a cancer grain works. So this is actually one of the first times I've got to talk about this with a group, especially on camera, so this is kind of nice to talk about actually. For those of you who are wondering why we converted it, this telescope's always had problems. It's never been a perfect telescope. We love the story. The story is very romantic of its construction by amateurs, and we love the fact that hundreds of thousands of people have looked through it. But it's always suffered. There's always been issues with it. And one of the issues involves its cancer grain design. So here's how it works. Light from outer space comes in, or whatever you're looking at, the mountains or whatever, strikes the primary mirror. Now, is the mirror flat or curved? Curved. It's curved. Is it concave or convex? Concave, right? Like a bowl, right? And why is that? If you're focusing the light. If it was a flat, it would just be like a vanity mirror, right? So the light gets focused out to right about where my mouse is, see this? But the light never makes it there because it's intercepted by the secondary mirror. Now in a cancer grain design, something very tricky happens. This is also curved, but it's convex. This allows you to modify the shape, if you will, of the light cone, causing it to converge more slowly, which simulates the effect of a much longer telescope. It creates a longer focal length. So in a cancer grain system, you have what's known as an effective focal length, which is different from the true focal length created by the primary optic. So the original mirror had a 3050 millimeter focal length, but thanks to the trickery of the cancer grain secondary, the effective focal length was 9,000 millimeters. Now, how many of you own a camera, like a real camera? I saw a few cameras. Can you give me an example of a good example of a telephoto lens?
No,
Anyone?
I'm stupid.
Think of a telephoto lens focal length. I bet someone knows.
175 to 300.
That's kind of a short one, but that's good. 175. Usually, I think
That's one you can afford.
that's true. That's true. They make it expensive, right?
Yeah.
A long one might be 300.
Yep.
So 9,000. So this should give you some perspective. We're talking about, you're used to a telephoto lens of a few hundred millimeters versus 9,000. Now that meant that the telescope provided a lot of magnification. It sounds like a good thing, but that's because of something I like to call retail science. We tend to market telescopes based on magnification, which you should never do. And they make these outrageous claims, like 10,000x magnification. Individual atoms on the moon's surface can be observed. And then you actually try to run a telescope with it. And have any of you ever tried to run a microscope or a telescope at its maximum magnification? What do you get?
Blur.
Horrible, gray, smudgy, disgusting mess. It's not realistic. Most observation is not done at those extreme magnifications, especially not visual observation. Also, the more you push the magnification, the more demanding you become of the quality of the optical figure, and also the quality of the seeing conditions, the Earth's atmosphere. Problem is, Goldendale does not always have perfect seeing conditions because of the turbulent air and the moisture from the river. And even though we love the story of the founders, they were not professional telescope makers, they were not researchers, they were not opticians, and the figure of the mirror was never quite up to snuff to support that 9,000 millimeter focal length. And then there's something even simpler. Not everything in the universe requires lots of magnification. Can you think of some big objects in the sky?
Oh, like the moon?
The moon's a good one. The moon's good because you can imagine its size, right? So watch this. This is a good example, watch. I'm going to put the sky on the screen right now. Okay, this is the sky right now. Let's go find the moon. Let's type in Mon. There we go. Okay, so I'm not going to change the magnification. I'm going to keep this zoom factor. I'm going to go now to my favorite space object, the Orion Nebula. Watch. As you can see, the Orion Nebula is bigger than a full moon. This is not an object that demands lots of magnification. It's an object that demands lots of light gathering abilities. Does that make sense? Can you think of any other big space object? I can think of one really famous one. The Andromeda Galaxy. It's about as big as 5 full moons. So you don't always want lots of magnification. Here's the problem. With the 9,000 millimeter focal length of the original cancer grain design, you could only operate the telescope at high magnification. So I couldn't, for example, show people the Andromeda Galaxy, because it was so huge that you'd be showing them a part of it, And the contrast was so poor because it's this huge gray smudge that it just, you couldn't see anything. It just looked like a gray field. And so people thought I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. They were seeing it, they just didn't understand what they were seeing. Now, there's another problem. For a cast grain secondary mirror to adequately intercept the cone of light without wasting light, it has to be physically large. So this baffle here was 10 inches wide. Now that's a 10-inch obstruction in front of our 24.5-inch primary mirror. Now the secondary obstruction obviously reduces the amount of light collected, but it also reduces the contrast of the image. This contributed to the decision to convert the telescope to Newtonian. But then there was also a financial reason we did it. In a cast grain system, if you're going to replace that system, both mirrors have to be constructed. And obviously, building a system with 2 curved mirrors is a lot more expensive than one where you only have 1 curved surface. Does that make sense? And as I said earlier, a Newtonian telescope only has 1 curved mirror, so they're significantly less expensive. So we were able to get a better mirror for the amount of money we had available in the project. Before I continue, are there any questions about that? So here's how the telescope looks today, or similar to it. Notice in the Newtonian, the secondary can be seen, it's reflective there. You might notice that it's smaller. This mirror is 6 inches, as opposed to 10. I can tell you right now, true story, when we first did this conversion, without even upgrading the original mirror, we still had the original primary in there. Just by converting it to Newtonian, it was like a new telescope. I could not believe how much it improved the performance. It was amazing. I was so impressed by it, I almost didn't want to go through with the rest of the upgrade, but it was too late. I'm glad, by the way, I'm glad we did. So yeah, I couldn't believe how much of an improvement it made. There's 2 big reasons. In addition to having a smaller central obstruction, which means better contrast, we also had a more reasonable focal length, because now we retain the original 3050 millimeter focal length, which meant for the first time in the whole history of the telescope, we could do wide field image work. And I noticed immediately, lay people who are not used to telescopes like to look through telescopes at low magnification, because the image seems bright and sharp. People don't like to see a hyper over magnified gray smudge. Almost nobody wants to see something like that. Again, that's only really useful for science. And we don't do science there, do we? This is a public observatory for education. So I found that by running the telescope with much more modest magnifications, people actually enjoy the view much better. They go, I hear way more, wow, and ooh, and amazing, much more than the, huh. I thought it would look better. Yeah?
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember those reactions. Yeah. Oh, how underwhelming. I'm glad I drove 4 hours for this. What a waste. It's 1 star. Dude. So Newtonian, this is when we still had the primary. Improved dramatically. Now there is one disadvantage to Newtonian. It's kind of an obvious one. It's an ergonomic disadvantage. What am I talking about?
Way at the top.
The eyepiece is now at the top of the telescope. Now the reason why this wasn't a deal breaker, the pedestal of the telescope is so tall that you had to use a ladder even when it was cast grain. So even with the cast grain assembly being back here, you still had to use a ladder to look through the telescope. Even me, I'm tall, I'm 6'5", and I could not reach that eyepiece unless the telescope was pointing directly up and I just kind of stood on my tiptoes. So you had to use a ladder regardless. So it wasn't like by doing this we had to suddenly purchase a ladder. The big ladder that we had for years is still in there and we're still using it. Are there any questions about that? Also, there's something kind of cool I didn't know. I didn't intend this, but it's kind of neat. People will climb the ladder up to the aperture of the dome, and then they get this beautiful vista. They get to see the scenery. That was an unintended consequence. People like that. So sometimes they'll linger up there, which actually annoys everybody below them, but they'll be like, oh, look at the scenery, I never saw it. So that's neat. I didn't expect that, so that was a nice bonus for doing that.
So now you can actually show the Andromeda Galaxy?
As an entire, yes, very good, yes. So actually, let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is not a picture I took, but believe it or not, Andromeda does look like that in a telescope. It's not that bright and colorful, but you can see its structure. So this is about the field of view you can now achieve with the telescope as it was. This is how it was when it was a cast grain. So you see how you're too close? And I can move around, but people couldn't tell. You wouldn't be able to see this much contrast to notice these lines. So it would just look like a big gray field. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that issue's been largely resolved. Now, just so you know, 3,000 millimeters is still really long, but it's not insanely long. It's not absurdly over magnified now. So when you have a telescope with such a long focal length, it's really only useful for very tiny things. But now we can actually do both. And by the way, because it is still long, the telescope can operate at both high and low magnification, which it couldn't before. So.
And the contrast that we're seeing here is because you did that?
No, I didn't take this picture.
Somebody did this with a time lapse.
Yeah, the reason this looks so neat, this is multiple minutes of time exposure, thoughtfully composited by someone who has a good eye, and it does look good. You cannot, no telescope on Earth can provide an image like this to your eye. Human vision is very, very weak. We have stronger luminance than we have chrominance sensitivity because of our rods and cone count. We have more rods than cones. So you can see dim things, but they don't have color. You probably notice in the dark you don't notice color anymore. I do a fun thing sometimes at night. People will have like brightly colored shirts, but you can't tell. So I'm like, what color is his shirt? I always get the kids to go, it's black and white, it's white. I'm like, no, it's like a bright red shirt, but you can't tell. So when you look through a telescope, you're looking through light. In this case, does anyone here know how far away this object is? This is 2.5 million light years away. So you're looking at light that's been traveling through space for 2.5 million years. It's going to be very what? Dim, right. And so you struggle with that, your eyes do, your brain does too. So the image I showed you, the Orion Nebula, this object, oh that's the wrong button actually, but that's also a good example. This is the Crab Nebula. This is one of those objects that people often see. This is a very famous object, so they often request it. It does not look like that in a telescope. It's a very dim gray smudge. So this is actually a better example of what I was going to show you. As Andy knows, because Andy's seen it before, Orion Nebula, you do see this shape, but of course you don't see the colors through the telescope. And as a Newtonian, this view is fantastic now of this object. Yeah. Before I continue, I want to tell you about the new mirror, but are there any questions? Really? During my show? This better be not important. All right, go away. Sorry, guys. So as I was saying, before I talk about the mirror itself, are there any questions about what I just talked about here? All right, let's get to the mirror project. This is kind of an epic tale. It's a long tale. I'm going to try to summarize it for you. We contracted, that is the agency in phase 2, contracted with a company in Pennsylvania to create a mirror using a new optical technology called cellular optics. It's a technology where you can create this sort of snowflake lattice structure where you only employ the exact amount of glass needed to provide the rigidity required by the client. Because there's less glass and higher surface area, theoretically a mirror like that cools down very quickly. Also, its design allows you to do some unusual things like attach it directly to the cell. This is the primary reason I wanted to do it, because this telescope's always had a problem with holding in the primary mirror. It won't fall out, but it can also shift around. So I was excited to have an opportunity to attach the mirror directly to the telescope itself with some kind of bolts and nuts. Because sometimes we do fun things. Because it's an educational telescope, sometimes I'll point it at the floor, which is something you never do. You should never point a telescope at the floor because the mirror might flop. But I did that because kids wanted to see how the thing worked, and it was neat to be able to point it at them and they could see their face in it. So I wanted to be able to retain that. Very long story short, the company failed. They essentially sold us a product they couldn't deliver. They had built many 16-inch mirrors, and they attempted to simply upscale the 16 to our 24.5-inch requirement. And what was happening was the new mirror was too soft, and every time they would apply a grinding apparatus to it, the mirror would bend. And because it was bending, the figure would be disrupted. Does that make sense? We went round and round with them, and this took almost 2 years, I think. You might remember that process, Andy. That was torturous. Yeah. And the problem was, they discovered they could not do it with only 2 months to spare before the drop dead date. So as you guys probably know, with capital projects, you don't just get all the time in the world. The money is not just there unlimited time. What happens if the time runs out?
You lose the money.
You lose the money. So now we had a crisis because we had 2 months and no mirror. So there's a pretty heroic story here. A very kind gentleman by the name of Mike Megan attempted a few years prior to sell us a big quartz mirror, 23-inch mirror out of an AWACS observation plane. Remember that, the Air Force mirror? So this guy had this big US Air Force spy mirror, and he wanted to sell it to us. And I said, that's cool. I can't afford it, When he found out about our crisis, he donated it to us. No, don't say it yet. This gets complicated. So this very kind gentleman does indeed donate us the mirror. It did not have any coating on it. It wasn't coated. Someone, I think Chris Carlson, the project manager, made a point to say, we really shouldn't have it coated until we have it tested. And I said, I totally agree. So we took it to one of the world's best mirror makers, who by bizarre coincidence lives in Washington State. Does anyone know who I'm talking about? You probably don't unless you're into this stuff. But this is Carl Zambuto. True story, if he's not the world's best mirror maker, he is in the top 3. And I had no idea that he lived in Washington. I've known about this guy since I was a teenager, and I'm not from here, I'm from the Northeast. because of his last name, I had no idea where he lived. I thought he lived in Africa or maybe Italy or something. I was like, Zambudo, what kind of name is that? It is Italian, by the way, as it turns out. But he's lived here apparently his whole life. And he has transformed a series of houses into a little factory where he's unusual in that he produces mirrors at every stage. So he cuts the material, he anneals it, grinds it, polishes it, and then he even coats it. So check it out. He has his own custom-built ion bombardment chamber where he creates his coatings without sending it out to a lab. Most mirror makers will use a lab. Now, because he does everything in-house, that allows him to have a pretty short turnaround time. That being said, if you do buy a mirror from this guy, it usually has an 8 to 12 month turnaround because it's still a very time-consuming process.
And you're in line.
Right, and you're in line, right, you're very good, and you're in line. So that's true, you might wait 2 or 3 years depending on what it is you're ordering. Long story short, I took this bizarre donated mirror, and that's not the mirror, to Carl. This is a publicity shot. And I had him test it, and he was appalled by it. Yeah, this is why I said don't cheer yet. So he said it had some problems. The mirror had an unusual design. It was drilled to allow cooling, but by drilling through the glass, and it was actually not glass, it was made of quartz. By drilling the quartz, it created some structural issues, and he showed me on his device that the mirror had an astigmatism like a Pringles chip. So it had a Pringles chip distortion. He said, I can fix that. I can figure it, but because the material is pre-stressed, it's gonna warp again. So I respectfully declined to figure this mirror. And I was like, well, I understand and I actually agree, but this is a terrible news because we have 2 months. Well, I can make you a mirror. I'm like, well, that's very nice, but we don't have time. We have 2 months. Well, we do something we call a super rush job. I can probably get it done in that time. And I go, well, yeah, that's very nice, but we probably can't afford that. He's right. You're right. You can't. It's like, so then what are we talking about? He's like, well, what can you spend? I'm like, I can't spend anything. We don't have a process. They don't just whip money out of my pocket and say, oh, I got this. So, long story short, some bureaucratic miracles happened. We were able to determine what we could provide for cost, and well, what do you know? He said that was enough. So he essentially made this mirror for us.
Now we can share.
Without, what'd you say?
Now we can share.
Yeah.
Hooray!
So yeah, well, let me tell you the whole thing. So he decides that we're gonna do it. And this is gonna sound really boring, but the most amazing part of this process for me was that we got it funded, because our bureaucracy is so slow that normally you cannot do anything in 2 months. It just cannot happen. And when we started, I was told, you can't do it. There's no way we can get this done. It doesn't matter if the money's there or not. We cannot get this done in that short amount of time. But they did, because some people high up in the capital process made some decisions. And I'll never forget, I'm not gonna name any names, Andy knows what I'm talking about. Someone in the capital process said, drop what you're doing and get this done instantly. And the word instantly was all caps, and it worked, because all the people that needed to get this done did do it. So we got Carl paid. He started work on the mirror along with his assistant. This is his assistant. And for almost the entire time of the 2 months, they worked on this mirror nonstop. So he said the way Super Rush works, if I'm not touching it and my assistant's not touching it, my robot's touching it. So they have a robot. So at almost no point was the mirror not being worked on. And this, by the way, that should give you some idea of how long it takes to make a mirror, that it took almost 2 months of constant work to get this mirror to the figure and ready to roll out the door, so to speak. So this is a 22-inch mirror that his assistant is holding, and this is our mirror in the chamber. This is our 25-inch. Yeah, it's actually figured to 24 and a
Is
half.
it quartz or not?
It's quartz, very good. It's not glass. It's not, and I want you guys to know, it's not the quartz you dig up in a quarry. That would not be suitable for optics. This is a product. This is a man-made product called fused silica. This was actually produced by GE for use in blast furnace windows. So it was actually not designed for telescope mirrors, but it ends up making good telescope mirrors.
So what does GE use it for?
Blast furnace windows. So blast furnaces where you have enormous pressures and temperatures.
Okay.
Quartz is much stronger than glass, and higher melting temperature and better thermal expansion coefficient, so it won't blow up. Now, on that subject, that segues into the old mirror. Before I tell you a few things about the old mirror, though, does anyone have any questions about this process here in the new mirror and all that good stuff?
Is the new mirror here?
It's installed. We installed it. Yeah.
Nice.
Hold that thought. I have some pictures of that in a second. I want to go back in time a bit to talk about why we changed the mirror in the first place. This is the original blank of glass. And this is Connor and McConnell. These are two of our 4 founders. This is the original glass that became the original primary mirror. And this is not typical glass, it's Pyrex. Now, what's Pyrex known for?
Heat.
Yeah. And what do you tend to, you probably own some. What do you do with it? Baking, right? So I'm from Corning, New York, so I appreciate this because Corning invented this. And Pyrex was a very popular product in the mid-20th century because suddenly you could put glass baking stuff in the oven and it wouldn't blow up. Have any of you ever exploded a glass pan or anything before? It's horrifying. Yeah, so I did it once. I once put the inner lining of a crock pot on the stove. I thought I was a genius and exploded. I was like, oh, that's why they have those warnings on it. I see. Yeah. By the way, this is a science question. Why does it explode? Why does normal glass in an oven blow up? It expands unevenly. So one area over here expands more than that, it stresses it, and then it cracks. Pyrex is good because it doesn't do that as much. So it has a better thermal expansion coefficient, a more even one also. And so for many years, Pyrex was a very popular substrate for telescope optics. It still is. You can still buy a Pyrex mirror today, to this day, if you want. But, you know, it's progress and all that. This mirror had some problems. As you can see, they were not young men in the 1960s. And when they designed this mirror, they were using 19th century thinking. In the 1800s, it was correctly identified that an optical system, a lens or a mirror, needs to be very hard. Why? Why does it need to be hard? Well, that's not true. So you can polish it and it won't bend. That's true. What else? What else? More simple than that. Its own physical weight will cause it to deform, right? And under worst case scenario, it could break. So using 19th century thinking, how did they achieve the hardness? Bigger. Yeah, use more material, just like old cars, right? Yeah, so 6,000 pound cars, because it's got a lot of steel, it won't break. Yeah. So guys, 5 inches thick, 5 inches of solid Pyrex. The original mirror weighs 200 pounds. We don't care about the weight. What we care about is the thermal mass. A telescope's optics have to acclimate to ambient temperature, or something very undesirable happens. The air above the glass will be heated or cooled, depending on the difference. And this distorts light. You've all seen this over the highway in the summertime. What am I talking about? The mirage, right. And that may look cool, but it's not desirable for science. You want to see an object, you don't want to see a shimmering blob. The problem is, the more mass you have, the longer it takes. This mirror took 4 hours to acclimate. And that's a real problem in Goldendale, because what happens as soon as the sun sets? The temperature drops. It's technically a desert, right? So the telescope was always playing catch-up. During our shows, it always had thermal issues. The telescope would always perform best after 2 a.m. and everyone's gone. And I tested it. I couldn't believe it. It was almost appalling to me how much better the image would get after everyone left. I was like, ah! So this is another one of the reasons we wanted to upgrade it. Quartz is a much harder material with a superior thermal expansion coefficient. And you might just have noticed in the picture here, our new mirror is much thinner. The new mirror is only 1.5 inches thick, and it weighs less than 60 pounds. Theoretically, it will cool down in less than 30 minutes. I haven't tested that yet because we installed it right, you asked about installing it. We installed it like the same week that we shut down. So I haven't really got to play with it too much yet. But I know it's going to be better. I don't know that it's going to do 30 minutes, but still that's much better than 4 hours, isn't it? And then I could add a fan if I have to. So, any questions about that? That thermal reason is actually the primary reason. That justification was the poor thermal performance of the old mirror.
How do you clean it?
So it's a good question. You never want to touch a mirror because you commit the sin of over-cleaning. One of the worst things that people do is they clean their mirrors all the time. Oh, it's got dust on it. I can't deal with it. It's just dust on it. And they clean it and they scrub away at it. And you should see the coating on the old mirror. It looks like you ran sandpaper over it because it's got 45 years of constant over-cleaning. The proper way to clean a mirror is to prevent it from getting dirty in the first place and then use air or even CO2, something compressed, to clean it. So, Andy, I haven't told you this yet, but I want to buy a compressor at some point just for that purpose, to clean it. Because Steve, my friend, remember Steve Stout? He's still around. At some point, he purchased a huge CO2 tank that's designed for cleaning sidewalks of snow. But I think the parkades actually use that to clean the mirror at some point, or tried to anyway. So the thing weighs like 100 pounds. Where is that tank? Is it still out? It's a gigantic monster tank. So we're not going to do that, but something smaller would probably be much more appropriate. So we're working on that. Does that answer your question about cleaning? Yeah. Now, the new mirror had to be installed in a telescope that was not designed for it. The old mirror was mounted in a truly awful way. I don't have a picture, but I'll just go back
Was
to
the installation part of the deal from the...
Oh, actually no. So one of the ways we got it funded is we decided to fund it with our own park money. So that's a good question. The mount for the secondary mirror and the primary were both furnished by us using our operating money and donation money, which worked out well because it wasn't that expensive. We were thrifty about it. And a lot of it involved using local machine shops also. So let me tell you how.
Yeah, you can
What?
see the big turn point.
What?
It looks like a pipe.
Yeah, that's just the hole that inside. This is not the telescope, guys. This is the chamber that they bombarded it with silver
Oh, I'm
ions.
sorry.
This is Carl Zambuto's device. This is
Oh,
not.
okay.
I want to make that clear. This is not the telescope.
Manufacturing source.
Yes.
Okay. I
So,
thought you said you had one of it mounted.
alright. No, I have the back of it, you'll see. So, let me go back to this picture real quick. Now, the way the mirror was originally mounted, I say this with kindness and love because I appreciate what these guys did. There is no worse way to mount a mirror than the way, you could not, if you tried to come up with a worse way to mount this mirror, you couldn't have done it. Here's how they did it. There were these large steel straps that hugged the mirror, like this, like a bear hug. And the mirror had a conical section to it. You can't really see in this picture, but the mirror is like this. And so because the straps hug it, it can't fall out. Does that make sense? The problem is the mirror weighs 200 pounds. So to secure something that heavy with straps, you have to put it under enormous crushing pressure. Now why is that a problem? Bending it. Yeah. So you're essentially defeating the whole purpose of making it so thick, which was to make it strong so it wouldn't lose its vigor. And you're putting it under hundreds, probably maybe thousands of pounds of crushing weight using these metal bands. Problem number one. Problem number two. Does anyone here know what collimation is? Collimation is the maintenance procedure of aligning two mirrors. The mirror has to be able to do this, to pivot around, so you can point it at the secondary, you understand? Well, the problem is, when you load it with these metal straps, it's going to resist that. So when you push up on it with the collimation bolts, you're now tweaking the straps and putting all these other loads on the mirror, like bending it this way. So I could actually hear the glass going pop, 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 when I would try to change the collimation. I want to repeat, if you would ask me to build a worse design, I couldn't have done it. I could not have made a worse, unless maybe I stuck it in there with tape or something. It's like, no, that should hold. until you point at the ground and it falls out. So the new design actually involves a real mirror cell. Let me show you real quick. I have a picture of, I really not remember how to spell the word telescope. Right, there it is. So this is not showing you the mirror inside of the tube, but I want to show you what's going on in this picture. I worked with a company in England to design a mirror cell that could go into the old telescope without requiring any modification. And I'm proud to say it worked. So this now has a much better mirror cell, essentially a modern cell that is a metal plate, it's an aluminum plate with hooks that go in front of the mirror and hold it down, and Teflon surfaces beneath it, so it gently cradles the mirror as opposed to crushing it with steel straps. And that whole assembly moves as one piece. And by the way, this is not a new invention, this is how modern mirror cells work. The entire, actually I have one over there, actually, you know what? I have a prop. So, this is a modern telescope made in China recently. And essentially all modern telescopes do the same thing. So, if you look at the back, you guys see some bolts back there? Okay, the cell is this metal part, and that holds the mirror. There are springs, which it floats against, and then I turn these large knobs to adjust the position of the cell. So the whole cell moves as one piece, so you're not stressing what? The glass. Oh, yeah, right. So that's what's in here. Now, the cool thing is we did manage to get it to work. I was able to reuse existing holes. Ironically, holes that were not designed for this purpose, but they were there so we could use them. So we did not have to chop anything off the old telescope. We didn't have to put any new holes in it. We didn't have to drill out anything. We were able to leave it as it was, but with a totally different cell system. And I was even able to reuse the original collimation bolts. These are those 3 bolts that you use to adjust the angle of the mirror. So personally for me, that's my favorite part of the story because we dramatically upgraded the telescope's mirror without chopping the telescope up. And we, as you remember, Andy, when we were brainstorming this, we thought about just replacing this whole bucket, just putting a new M1 bucket on it and just getting rid of it, maybe putting the old one on display. So the fact that we were able to reuse it was kind of cool. So, any questions about that? Questions? Now, the new mirror is installed and it does work. I've tested it on exactly 2 things, the planet Mars and the moon, because they were out when I tested it, and it was one night, and That's the end of that story. So hopefully, soon we'll have more people looking through it when we reopen the building. I didn't know if I had a time clock, I'm probably way over, but are there anything else I can tell you about the facility? Because I do have a few brief things to show you with the exhibits if you're interested, but besides that.
Do you have any indoor shots of the building?
I don't have any ones that are finished to the point we saw this week, but I do have some. Actually, in a way, it's better because you get to see the disaster area. So, this lovely mess. Beautiful, so majestic. So this is the new classroom. I specifically brought this picture up because I wanted to show you what these circles are. Those are going to be backlit exhibits in the classroom. This is the north-facing wall. See these 3 pieces of wood? Dana, I think you mentioned it in your presentation. I'm kind of a geek for display technology, and I'm very happy we have 3 98-inch screens that are going in. We did not do a projector. So this was kind of a new thing we're doing. Originally we were thinking of doing a screen like everybody does, everyone on earth, they just use a projection screen. But I was like, TVs are getting cheap enough that they're now competitive with good high-end projectors. So we ended up buying 3 giant 98-inch screens. And that was not actually funded by the capital project. Our agency found that money elsewhere. Actually, our director did that, Don Huck. He had found that money for us to pay for the TVs, so that's cool. Any questions about that? Here's the new store, which is before the beautiful new wood is on it. And there's our office back there. I personally don't think the office is that big, but everyone was joking about how big the office was. I'm like, okay, because we're gonna see how many people we can get in there. Apparently, a lot of state parks have really small offices. Like, that's what I heard from everybody. This is, this you understand, this is beautiful. I was like, all right, I'll take your word for it. What is it, what?
Or no office at all.
Or no office at all, right?
Work at it up front.
Right. So, since I brought these pictures up, I did want to show you some of the exhibit plans. So, check it out. This is the plan for that space. Do you see all the green squares? Every chair will have a sticker that represents a different element on the periodic table of elements. Yep. Which is fun, science center is fun. And it's not a random chemistry lesson, it's within a context of what we call nucleosynthesis, the mechanisms in the universe that produce these elements. So these light boxes just detail the 5 primary mechanisms of nucleosynthesis in the universe. So we have Big Bang, high mass stars, supernova explosions, low mass stars, and then cosmic ray spallation. So that's what those circles will be there. Any questions about that? On the other side of the wall, we're going to have a giant mural. Go back here. This is if you could have magic fisheye view and you can see the whole room at once. So there's going to be a mural of planets on the right, and there's a ramp that goes down, a spiral ramp. You probably didn't see it in the pictures. Let me see. I don't think I have a good picture of the ramp.
Was that the stair that was on one of the early drawings?
No, that's on the outside. That's been deleted actually. I wish that had stayed, but so you don't see it in this picture, but this part of the floor right here is smooth, where this is stair-stepped. There's these levels. And so this is a ramp, and this is for people with wheelchairs to be able to access the bottom, but also it's going to be an interpretive gallery where you walk along. And you have all the planets to scale. The gas giants will be paintings, and then the smaller planets are all models. So that's kind of fun. Any questions about that?
And some of those displays are why the opening isn't starting until...
No, I mean, they are behind schedule, but we have a decision to make, and Andy, we'll talk a lot about that. We're all going to talk about it. If the building is well and truly finished, and the parking lot is well and truly finished, and the exhibits are nowhere close to done, I would have a hard time justifying not opening. But, if the exhibits are almost finished, then yeah, we could delay. This is a decision that has to be made. We'll find out. It all depends on what happens with the exhibits. Timing. It's all about timing, right? Frankly, just personal opinion, I have no trouble opening without exhibits because our bread and butter is the shows that we do. But it won't be good for people that just want to randomly show up between shows. And the whole idea of having self-guided exhibits is that people can do stuff between shows and so on. Any questions about that? As far as dates, we always wanted to do summer of this year. To keep it safe, we're thinking autumn of this year as far as when we're going to reopen. Yeah. Now, let's talk ambition a little bit. The building rooms are big and kind of glorious, and I want to show you. Dana's heard me talk about this a lot, and this is right up your alley as people in the local Chamber of Commerce. I think this room has a lot of opportunities for rental and versatile use. So it'd be really cool if we can do movie nights, weddings. That's why I want that rooftop deck. People are going to want to get married up there. They already want to get married at the current building. So there's all kinds of stuff we can do. So I think you have a unique facility that could lend itself to all kinds of creative uses. Yeah. If you want to brainstorm some stuff, I'll tell you if it's crazy or not, if you have any ideas off the top of your head. I've always thought that we could get some more local activity there if we do that, because almost all of our visitors are far away. Most of our visitors come from Portland or Seattle. It's amazing how few locals we get. I mean, it's not unusual for us to have 0 locals on a night. None, 0. Almost all of our visitors come from far away. But it might change a bit, we'll see.
You had some challenges with the parking and people like blinding everybody with their headlights as they're coming up. How did you mitigate
But I'm
that?
glad you reminded me of that hilarious topic. So, the parking lot. So this kind of ghostly drawing here where my mouse is tracing is the old parking lot. All of this and this is all the new parking lot. And you might notice that the road loops over to the left like this.
Lights go away.
And then, yes, so the lights go away. And then when they finally do enter the parking lot, the lights are kind of going up to the northeast. The building is over here. Theoretically, it won't completely eliminate the problem, but we think it'll strongly address it. And then we might have some sternly worded signage about late people showing up in the middle of the night and blinding everybody, saying, if you're here after sunset, please park here. And we might have a spot just for late people to park. So, spike strips is even better. Yeah. And then this drawing doesn't show it, but there's also parking over here and over here for large vehicles like school buses. Any questions about that? Let me show you a much better picture. So, I'm kind of excited about the ground plan, to be honest. I didn't think I would be, but this has ended up being a pretty neat part of the project. So, let me show you. This is the building and the new the new sidewalk plan. So, let's talk about the sidewalk first. You're going to have 3 circles, see this? Those will be like decks. There's going to be some viewers here, like those, those bino viewers you see at the tourist traps. We'll have some pointing at like Mount Hood and some other things. Some of them might be maybe agile. There's a concern about having an agile telescope out because someone might point it at the sun. So we have to make some decisions about that as where they point and everything. That's why I mentioned Mount Hood is going to be one of the things. I thought it would be fun to have one telescope that points permanently at that little spot on the highway. What?
Chamber of Commerce building? No.
Oh, no, Chamber. What's that? What's that? What do we call that spot that's over there on the highway?
That's the 4 Mountain View.
The 4 Mountain View. So I think it'd be neat if we point a telescope at that, and then we have a telescope down there pointing back up, so maybe families can wave at each other. We'll see. So yeah. This drawing has picnic tables here. We are not doing that. That's a very weird thing, but that's not happening. There will be lots of picnic tables, but we're not going to put them in the middle of our new decks. So probably. These 2 are probably going to be our primary viewing areas while we wait for access to our awesome roof deck. The roof deck, as you can see just by this drawing, is much bigger, so I can't wait till we can get up there.
Could a private business sort of take that over, fund it?
I don't know. I'd be neat.
Like a winery thing or something?
That'd be cool. A winery, how'd you hear that? Yeah. Good job.
They used to do that. Maryhill State Park had.
As state employees, we cannot ask, but
Right.
if someone asked on our behalf.
No, but they get the right to use it too. It's like a cooperative thing. But anyway, I said it.
That's a good example of the politics of accepting donations. If someone's going to say something like that, like, we want unfettered access to it whenever we want, including during shows, and we want to be able to lock it off to everyone else, like, I'm sorry, we can't accept that.
No.
We have to. So there has to be an agreement. That's
But they could have some.
and you do worry about things like that. So we do get something called restricted donations, and that's a good thing. We like restricted donations where someone says we want you to use it for X thing. But sometimes people might be way too specific and demand things that are unrealistic. I have a friend that works at one of our parks on the west side, and she told me they'll get donations like that, where they'll say things like, my family wants to be able to come on the park property whenever we want and use the park for any way we see fit. Like, we can't accept this, please take a check back. So yeah, we don't necessarily want that. So yeah. So we'll see. I don't know. It'd be awesome if someone wanted to fund it. That would be awesome, because I would love to be able to get up to that roof sooner than later. I hope you don't have to wait.
How much will it cost?
Well, they asked for 1.2 million. I don't think it needs to cost that much. That's just an opinion. I think it could be done for a lot less than that. So, yeah, that's what they asked for and didn't get. Maybe they didn't get it because it was so much, I don't know. But I would like to think that there might be a much cheaper way to get up there. By the way, I'm not even opposed to like a lift, you know, like a stairway and a lift, because it's all about ADA. The reason it's a ramp is so we can get folks up there who have trouble
It's
walking.
huge, and
So-
that includes putting the dome or another dome on the roof, plus the tread material and exhibits along the rampway and.
It's a full-
Yeah, part of that ask was
other
exhibit.
pads, not just a ramp.
Right, exactly. And I think that if you pared it down and it was just a ramp, it might be a lot less than 1.2 million. So that's my hope, Yeah. So, by the way, speaking of that, this drawing actually does show the new layout for the proposed ramp. This is a pile of rocks. Oh, you know what? You
I
need to
was
see.
gonna ask what happened to the rock.
You need to see that. You need to see that rock, that pile. Hang on.
So is
Just give
the
me-
partial rock ramp launch part still going in?
So this mighty pile of rocks seems impressive, but it's gotten much bigger since then. This is all rocks that have been dug up during excavation of the project. And right now they're all sitting in the west overflow parking lot, but we plan to relocate many of them to this loop that you see here. And essentially that would be an investment in future fill for a ramp that goes up like this, and then you can see the dotted line here where it would follow
Up to the roof?
up to the roof, yeah. And so the architect showed me some 3D renderings. It looks amazing if we can do it. So also it allows us to retain the sidewalk, because one of the problems with the ramp design as it was that essentially it would force us to delete all this walking space because you have this giant ramp there. So also he felt that it might be too steep. It's kind of an aggressive climb to go around the South Dome and up like that. Well, this is a much more gradual. And those of you who know the grounds up there, the hill drops off pretty precipitously right here. So if you're up here, you feel like you're kind of flying. It'll be kind of a neat thing to be
a
up.
cool viewpoint.
Yeah.
Creates some shade opportunities and things underneath it that are out of the weather as well.
Yes. Now also on that subject, in this drawing we see the North Dome. Remember that? We're going to do the temporary / permanent North Dome. The decision has been made to move it to where my mouse is here. That way, you could access it from the ramp if we make it 2 stories. Because there is a desire to make this North Dome 2 stories in the future so that it can see over the new building. The new building does block some, not all, but some of its view shed. So by making it 2 stories tall, we could solve that problem. And this way, if you use the ramp to get to it, you wouldn't have to build a special stairway or ladder just for the telescope. Yeah. So, questions about that? Let's go back to the parking lot. So we got this awesome Nautilus shell kind of rotating thing here. This is where you turn around. But the turnaround is only for big vehicles. For regular folks, they would use these stalls like any car and do K-turns to get out. And this roadway is both entrance and exit. Here would be this spot here, and also here would be where there'd be large vehicle parking. Questions about that? As came up in the meeting, all the lights around it are going to be very low to the ground. They're not going to be way overhead lights. And they're going to be red or amber. And full cutoff, of course, so they're IDA compliant. The color still is yet to be determined. The architect wants to do red. Turns out the IDA actually prefers amber. I gotta say, I kind of prefer the amber because it's more useful light. The red is you know, it's kind of discombobulating. People that aren't used to red, it might as well be completely black. I've learned that.
20 years in the military, red light stinks.
Yes, yeah, so I'm pushing for amber myself, personal opinion. So,
I know it's nice.
now, speaking of land and ground and parking lots, Dana and others know the city is probably going to donate 2 acres to us. And the 2 acres are right over here to the west of this. That we were hoping to do the signing for that this week, but I guess there's been delays and stuff. So that's going to be cool. Andy and I talk a lot about turning it into a play structure area for kids or something, or maybe overflow lot. Because even though we're going to have almost 50 slots in the newest parking lot, I expect it's going to be one of those if you build it, they will come things where our visitation is going to increase so much, we're going to have the same old problems we used to, but at a higher magnitude, because we have more cars now. So we might need an overflow lot. So we will see. So, any questions about that?
We need more personnel.
We need more staff. You're asking it? Well, hold on. What did you say?
Staff.
Yeah, we hope to have an increase in our staff funding so we can bring on at least one more year-round position. Right now, I'm the only year-round position at the observatory. That's a little tight. We would like to have at least one more, and then there's going to be hopefully more seasonals. So that's one of those to be determined things. We'll find out. I'm always quite pessimistic about that. I always expect the least amount of money possible, but we'll see. Maybe we'll luck out and get lots of staff money. Speaking of staff, I'm still trying to fill our interpretive assistant position this year, so if you know anyone, let me know. And we have had it out twice now. It would be nice to fill that position this year. And we've had issues with geography and people being far away and stuff. This has been you guys are quite quiet. I didn't expect you to be such a well-behaved group, actually, with all the alcohol. So do we have any other questions? I enjoy talking about this, yeah. I thought I heard one over here. Did you have?
Yeah, what about parking people in town and shuttling out for larger events?
I have a wonderful success story about that. So during the solar eclipse, I can't believe how well it worked. I thought it was going to be a disaster, but they used the school buses. We ferried people up from the school parking lot. It was like clockwork. It was like something out of like you'd see in like a big city subway system. I couldn't believe how regular the buses were coming and going, and everyone. Very few people annoyed by it. Very few people got stranded or had to wait around. It worked beautifully. So the answer is that's certainly, apparently, very feasible. So I think that would be very obvious for things like big events, like space events.
We're trying to get people trained that when you come to an event in Goldendale, you park at the high school and we take you to the event.
Yeah.
We do the same thing to the rally that's coming up June 1st. That's where, although
what?
Well, just working with the schools, it's been great to work with those school buses.
Speaking of events, we do have one coming up quite soon. In fact, it's almost too soon. Anyone know what happens in November of this year? A space event? Anybody? So this is from 2016. What is that little black dot? Mercury, the planet Mercury. So in 2016 we had a Mercury transit. We have another one this year on November 11th actually. So November 11th we have another Mercury transit. This will be the last transit of any planet for, wow, just now that I think about that, it's going to be almost 20 years. So in the 2030s we're going to have another transit. So
what date is that?
the 11th of November, I believe.
Veterans Day.
Yeah, Veterans Day, isn't that funny? So maybe we'll have people for Veterans Day and then they get to stay for a transit. That'll be something. So hopefully we're ready for that. I hope we're up and running by November. It is kind of close. I hope the weather cooperates.
Are you working with some partnerships on the live streaming that?
Yes, and here's the good news. You might remember.
I remember.
You did painfully, yeah. We live streamed the Dark Sky Symposium. We also live streamed this. The live stream of the symposium went all right because we used YouTube Live.
But nobody was watching.
But no one watched it. But the point is it worked, technically. It was a technological achievement that no one appreciated yet. But nobody saw. But this was a disaster because I partnered with the Coca-Cola Space Science Center, which supposedly does the best live space stuff in the world. And they did they destroyed our view. Essentially what they did was, this is not a joke, I'm not making this up. Their live stream consisted of them tuning into our stream on a computer monitor, pointing a camera at that computer monitor, and then streaming that. It was so bad, I could not even see Mercury. I couldn't see it. All we saw was this huge orange blob. I said, guys, it looks terrible. Oh, it looks great on our end. I'm like, of course it looks great on your end. But millions of people will see a giant orange blob. There was like 180,000 people watching. I'm like, oh no. So like 180,000 people saw this enormous orange blob with no detail at all. So this year we're doing it ourselves. And we're going to use something like YouTube Live or something. I don't want to partner with anyone unless I can find someone that's able to do it right, you know? So anyway, that's the answer to your question.
If you had somebody with an international grant that they got from a port somewhere to promote.
That's crazy talk. What are the odds of that? Yeah, Oh, by the way, this segues into something I'm really excited about. We're going to have the fastest internet in Goldendale, so you can all be jealous of that, because we're going to have a nice fiber optic connection up there. And as you guys probably know, Goldendale does struggle with internet connectivity. Everything's oversubscribed, CoreNet is oversubscribed, CenturyLink is blah, 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 blah. But, you know what the best internet in town is? Cell phone. I tether my phones. 4G LTE is amazingly fast. Well, we can't run a facility on, and we've discovered, we do that here down at Stonehenge. You can't really run a facility on cellular internet. It's just not, it's not quite reliable enough. So we're going to have fiber optic internet in the new building. It's great until it's not. It's great, yeah, exactly. It's perfect until it doesn't work, and then it's the worst thing ever. Your emotions are very extreme, like, this is great, ah! Like, so, what were you saying?
Is the fiber to the building now?
Yes. Well, no, good question. I mean, the conduit's there, but it will be. It will be. I'd be surprised if the fiber's not ready by opening day, because it's ready to be ready. The conduit's ready, the cabinet is ready, everything's ready except for the actual running of the fiber. So the fiber in question has to be rerouted a bit. It was going up to the AT&T tower there, but the installers seem to think they can do it. And it is funded also, we found money to do it. That was not explicitly part of the capital project, but we found a way to fund it, so. Anyway, we will have good internet, and that's important for stuff like this. So there's your natural event in November. We have Mercury transit, that might be our first big draw, we'll see.
I wonder if that would be a timing for opening, kind of.
Okay. I'll tell you my original thought for a grand opening. I thought about redoing it on October, because that's when the original grand opening was. The problem is it's cold out. And this is a funny story. If you look at the old newspaper articles about opening day, all these different articles written by different journalists from different newspapers, different TV stations, and every one of them includes a word like frigid, freezing, wind chill, cold, teeth chattering. Like, there's not one of the articles fails to mention the fact that apparently everybody was freezing to death at that. So I hope, so if we wait until October, there's a risk of everyone freezing to death. So we'll see. November is kind of right. It's so close to, so close to October. So I don't know. We'll see. November's also cold. So I don't know. And like you said, Andy, it's really a matter of timing, and we don't know when we're going to reopen yet.
That's a crapshoot. I mean, the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I down here in November was, we got pretty lucky. It was pretty.
Actually, the weather was nice. That was a nice day.
Yeah, it was cold.
Well, it's cold, but it wasn't cold. There was a lot of reason.
It wasn't teeth chattering.
Teeth chattering. It wasn't.
I think that a grand opening party could be thrown anytime you want to throw it. It doesn't have to be when you actually open.
No, and
Throw the party when it's good to throw the party.
I thought about that. And what would be nice is if you did that in the spring,
Yeah,
and the weather is beautiful.
it'd be totally
That-
great.
What do you guys, I'd like to hear, I have no opinion on this. What do you guys think about that? Doing a grand opening that has no connection to the actual opening date. Does that matter to anybody?
But after, not before.
Yeah, we don't want to make promises we can't keep. This place is going to be great. Promise.
Well, by then you have all your displays totally done, and everything is dialed, and you also have some
And the year's
materials
out.
together about the ramp,
Yeah,
and the
go
funding
for
of the
that.
ramp, and.
No, guys, she's making a good point. You mentioned something, you said dialed. I have to tell you, one thing that makes me a little anxious. When you go into a new building, you have no idea what the dynamic's going to be. You don't know how it's going to work. I didn't know that open pit was there. Oh, I didn't know that was, that doesn't work. Oh, that's a disaster. So if we know how the place works,
Yeah.
so to speak, and we get our groove back, then maybe then it would be a good time to do a grand opening. So
And you've got lots of time to do marketing and like documentation of the space and pictures and.
good, these are all wonderful
And
arguments.
then do a big splash.
I'm really glad to hear you say that because it takes a little pressure off. I like that.
What was it,
Observatory
2023?
gets its groove back.
Yeah, get our mojo back. And I miss that. I miss having.
2020 sounds.
2020, it does.
What'd you say?
2020 sounds good.
Maybe we can get some airtime, a TV show.
Yeah, that's not bad. Ponder. That's good.
May 20th, 2020.
I do have. Wait.
What about presidential?
May 20th, 2020. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. But I'm trying to think. I was thinking maybe 24th.
Just don't do 420.
I'm sure. Well, we get enough people to visit for that reason on that day anyway. Well, man, this place is cool. Why are things round? These are the kind of questions I get. And it's from those folks. Briefly, I do have pictures of opening day. Just give me 1 second here. Let's see. Where do I? Yeah, check.
You could do a pre-party to the opening day, as far as advertising goes.
This is the original opening day that was so frigid, apparently. Everyone's in misery. Look at the sadness. So cold. Why are we here? So there's raising the flag for the first time. Yeah. There's before the show. Yeah. One thing that strikes me, guys, when I look at these old pictures, it is amazing how the facility did not change at all. Like the only thing that things that changed, there was a new door put here, and they changed the light fixtures, these ones, to different sconces, and that was literally it. The place was a time capsule, and that wasn't always a good
The
thing.
Grange still owns those chairs out.
Is that right? Can they bring them back? It'll save us some money. You know, these chairs have been, or these were the classroom chairs from the original building, and they were there. So Andy, I think you disagree with me on that. I think they're as old as the place. I think they're as old as the building. The reason I thought that is I have a picture of one of the...
These just strike me as very 1980s, not
You think?
1970s.
I believe you, but I saw some pictures that were interesting. Here, let me see if I can find it. Here, watch. Where, I actually have, yeah, right there, look, they're there, look, there they are, look.
Back there.
Behold!
That's
zoom in.
Zoom in.
Hang on.
You need better mirrors, better communications.
You gotta zoom in on them.
I have to load it in Photoshop to zoom in, hang on a second, so.
Oh, but there's arms on those
They
chairs.
got arms
Each
on
one
them.
have arms.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
It's Photoshop!
Hang on, watch. Here it comes.
Magnification?
I'm loading. Okay, loading image. I think you're about to eat some humble pie, Andy. Oh yeah, that sure looks familiar to me.
Oh my gosh.
It is those chairs. It's just yes.
Arms.
He brought you here for
All right, I'm out of here.
Sucker.
That was a sucker bet.
Yeah, I already knew. That's right. Or at least I had a good reason to think. So anyway, I thought I might have interrupted a question with a chair joke. So someone have a question over here? What? I thought I heard one. Okay.
How many people are you expecting or wanting to bring to the observatory, like, in a month or a year?
Well, I mean, this is not crazy to say that what we'd like to see is all the seats being filled every night. So the simple math there is 145 people a night. Now that's not crazy because we would get that on good summer nights with the old facility, and that's one of the problems we had. So I'd say max utilization for the summertime. If we're open 5 days a week, right now we're doing 3 days a week right now. We'll probably go back to 4. Ideally we want to do 7 days a week, but that goes back to your question about staffing. Really the staffing model determines how much we can be open.
And weather. Come on.
Well, that's what's so surprising. So even during bad weather, because it's like a science center, people can come in and have a show. I'm very proud of this. Some of our best nights ever at the observatory have been on cloudy nights, where we do stuff in the classroom. Because in a way, then people have more time to learn about stuff and ask questions. So I'm not saying we should do that, but it's not as big of a compromise as you would expect. So we still get groups on cloudy nights and rainy nights.
Especially if it's really cold and people want to be inside.
Yes, and that's exactly why. Because they're like, it's freezing out there, they don't want to go outside, exactly. Because as you guys know, the dome is not heated on purpose, so that it's the same temperature. So to answer your question, in summertime, I'd say max utilization. I can't give you a number because I don't know how many days will be open. What would be cool is if we do increase our visitation in the winter, because even though I say people do come in the winter, it's much less. We usually would not have more than 20 people in a wintertime night, unless there was something going on, so like a special thing. So I'd like to improve that, and one way we can do that is by advertising that the place is more than just an observatory. And I point this out to people who talk about the seating conditions or want to nitpick the lights in town or whatever. I'm like, listen guys, it's not just an astronomy club. It's a place for people to learn about stuff in the classroom. So you can do, and there's exhibits. So you can do stuff. You don't have to be there just for this night sky. So that's something to think about.
How are we doing on light pollution in Goldendale?
So you guys may have heard, actually you came up a lot yesterday during our big thing. They did install those new lights. They're full cutoff LED fixtures, and they have the ability to be fully dimmed. Let me show you something kind of cool. Watch this. I have a before and after picture for you. Now, both of these pictures were taken in the exact same spot with the exact same camera settings about 3 years apart. This is the old sodium lights. These are the new LEDs. You might notice a drop in color temperature, and you might notice the sky's a little darker. Now, someone thought that the stars look brighter, but that's because they're actually out of focus in this image, but they're in focus in this one. If I had noticed that, I would have deliberately put them out of focus just to create more continuity, but I can tell you without even analyzing it that this is darker. I think you can tell.
Changed what?
The town replaced all of the low pressure sodium,
The whole
high
town?
pressure.
The street
Yeah,
lights.
all street lights.
Wow.
Yeah.
Replace the street
All
lights.
street. And here's the fun part.
Right.
They're dimmable, and they're going to time the dimming schedule with our operating schedule.
Oh, I thought you had a button.
Oh, that's.
Oh, I can't. So he offered me the ability to do that. I'm like, I don't want to be responsible for the lights. It's like, oops, you know, so, and then, by the way, do you know who would be very upset if I did that? Seriously, serious question. Who would be very upset if I turned all the lights off? Do you guys know?
The police department.
The police. So their police were very concerned about our little experiment but we dimmed them. We had to make sure they knew when we were going to do it. They didn't want the lights to be dimmed during the middle of Friday. Interestingly, it turns out that the nights matter. So Friday and Saturday night in particular, they didn't want to lose the lights, Friday and Saturday. So it was really quite fun because I was up on the hill with my stopwatch and I'm watching and I got the schedule set and I could watch the lights go like that. That was pretty cool to see that, and I did take some pictures of that. So that works.
Cool.
Now let's briefly cover something about the lights. I know there are people, because I've already heard from them, who don't like the fact that we've changed from high pressure sodium to LEDs. Anyone here know why? Anyone know why that's angering very specific people with unrealistic expectations?
The PUD, they want some more power?
No. Well, the PUD loves it. You know, because so let me show you. I'm going to show you a picture of the spectra of a bunch of random elements. How would you describe the spectra of sodium?
Simple.
Simple, okay, and it's very specifically yellow, right? Astronomers, like research astronomers, like not even high pressure but low pressure sodium lights, because the corruption of the data that it creates can be easily subtracted from the data because it's a very explicit, distinct wavelength of light. Whereas LEDs that are intended to be white produce broad spectrum interference. It's very difficult to delete from spectral data. So those LEDs are not good for research astronomy. However, Goldendale Observatory is not a research facility and will not become one, at least not one that does spectroscopic analysis. So the color temperature and the whiteness does not harm us. I actually prefer the aesthetic appearance. I think it looks nicer with the cooler light. And the darkness is obviously nice, and the dimmability is very nice. Also, we're just entering a new phase in lighting. This is the first revision of human lighting technology in 100 plus years. I mean, you don't get to do that very often. So if it's determined that, for example, there are biological factors, that maybe cooler light is bad for our circadian rhythms and whatnot, it wouldn't be surprising in the next 20 years or so, we see another revision of lighting technology, where maybe we deliberately warm it up. You may have seen you can do that with your cell phones now. You can warm the light from your cell phone screen, because it apparently keeps you up at night. Have you seen that? So in the future, it wouldn't surprise me if LEDs get revised and they start deliberately warming the color if it affects biology as much as we would think it might. So I just want you all to be aware it does not harm our ability to do what we do up there. In fact, I was very impressed by how dark it looked. And by the way, images like this exaggerate the brightness. Why? Right, these are long exposures. I think these were like 1, maybe 2 second exposures.
I thought you were going to say you had the wind turbine companies change their lights.
No, they're fine. The wind turbines are fine. They're red and they're really low and they're only blinking and they don't cause problems. The issue is obviously the lights in the town. That being said, I'll make a little public service announcement since this is being recorded. If you do have lights in your building, consider improving them. And there's so many ways you can improve lights. So I like motion sensors.
More economic.
Because it saves money. But as long as the fixture doesn't project light up, that helps us out. So think about that. So there are a few lights in town that are obnoxious.
Is there any funding available for helping private business owners?
You'd be a good person to ask that. What do you think, Dana? Funding
No,
for...
it's really simple.
Yeah.
This is like pie plate type fixes.
But the reason I asked you though, because didn't the Google grant have some money in there for helping pay for that kind of stuff, or no? No?
No, it was just for some marketing and
I see.
get the word out.
You know,
There are grants, but I don't know of them any particular ones.
We had a huge industry that had a problem, maybe.
The PUD still has some lighting retrofit money. You know, if somebody still had, you know, older technology, they could update to LED full cutoff lights. The trouble is, those grants for energy efficiency don't have anything to do with dark sky. So you could actually make your lights quite a bit worse by doing an LED conversion.
You could put a bare LED bulb on your yard and you saved electricity, but you've actually made the lighting worse because it goes up. So it's really about that. And I like how you said pie plate or coffee can's a good one. People will take a coffee can and put it on top of their light and it actually works, believe it or not. Paint it, it doesn't look so stupid actually. It actually looks deliberate. I once told a guy you could paint. He had an outdoor light, and he took some silver paint, like you see in the restaurants, and he painted the glass, except for a slit on the bottom, so the light would only go down. That was actually really cool. It worked, and it cost him like 10 cents, in glass. In paint. So that was easy. So think about it creatively. Those of you watching at home, if you have some obnoxious lights in your property, consider doing something simple and cheap, like a pie plate or a coffee can, or buying a fixture that's full cutoff. And by full cutoff, it just means the light doesn't go up. those of you who know me know this project, this is something that comes up a lot, and I don't ever want to be the guy that tells you how to run your life or tell you how to light your house, but this is just one of those things that helps us out. So if you think about it, if it comes up in conversation, consider improving your lights. That's all I would say about that. That's something the chamber could help with too. I don't know which, I mean, not without spending, I don't know how much it would cost you, but yeah, it's up for me. Yeah, information. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about making this like a middle school project.
I just want to,
Yeah, let the kids go and infiltrate the community.
if we do it nicely, I'm all for it. I just don't want it to be this like doom and gloom. The observatory's doom, the lights, because people act like the town is super over light polluted. I mean, did you see that video of the Milky Way? Let me show everybody this.
Even in that picture, you see the Milky Way.
Well, and that's a terrible picture. Let me show you a good one. So this is not fake. This is real. If Goldendale had a serious light pollution problem, I could not have taken this picture. And I took this before the changeover. So I took this before they changed the lights. So when people say, oh, it's a light polluted disaster and you can't do astronomy, that is not true. It's incorrect. If I had to list all the problems the observatory has, I don't even list this, light pollution, because right now I need money. We need money for equipment.
Green. We need
What do you say? Green. We need money for things, staff, equipment, things like that. I greatly appreciate any help you can make, anything you can do for the lights, but it is not on my list right now. It is something I do plan to talk about more now that the building's finally getting close to finished. But it doesn't jeopardize our ability to operate. So I just want to say that because the issue gets inflated into this horrible, violent thing, and it's not. It could, we're not Los Angeles, and they have the best observatory in the world. Over 1 million people visit Griffith every year. They have no stars. The joke is they movie stars. That's not even that funny. It's not even a very clever joke, but that's the joke. And so 1 million people a year to the Griffith Observatory to look at the sun and moon and planets because there's no stars, and we do much better than that. And I'm so proud of this. Almost every single night during the summer, people say things like, "I've never seen this many stars. I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen the Milky Way before." And then my favorite story is you get little kids and they ask, "What's that cloud?" And I'm like, "That's the Milky Way." "What's that?" I'm like, "Oh, have you never seen that before?" And where do you think those kids are from? Big cities, right? Like Portland and Seattle, right? Exactly.
We're really looking forward to having people at the new observatory building. The program starts and the city streetlights dim down.
Yeah.
All the city streetlights dim down.
Wow.
But I have some bad news about that. It dims very subtly though. It's not like a boom, like that. So people might not, it wouldn't be like, no, because they might not notice it. But it's more of a, look how much darker they are now.
Right.
And I had the coolest story. My assistant Erin, she and I were out there one night. We're like, does the town look different to you? We didn't realize they had started doing it. We're like, wow, look at the difference. It was neat because they didn't tell us. So it was a very scientific experiment because I was not predisposed to noticing it, but I noticed it. I was like, oh, it's darker. So that it does work. It does actually work. That was cool. Yeah.
I just wanted to say thanks for coming out. It's 8 when we told people we would let them go. But thanks for Jacob Williams for coming out with some wine. Thank you very much. And for Pete's for bringing the great pizza. And for Dwynel's for the beer, and for all of you for coming out, and Troy for your time and expertise, and we're excited about the next phase.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
In closing, can I show you one more picture? Is that cool?
No.
So, no. During besides Dana, were any of you present at the presentation at the observatory yesterday with the commissioners? I don't think any of you were. There's going to be an exhibit in the classroom overhead, and I was hoping to show this to the commissioners yesterday, but they had no time.
Yeah.
So what I did was I have 7 pictures of the Milky Way, and they're all stitched together. Watch. Here it comes. It's loading. Now watch. So using Photoshop, we stitched all of the 7 exposures of the Milky Way together, and this is going to be overhead, obviously without the whiteboard. So this is what's going to be in the classroom it's going to be a backlit display, and back to the light pollution thing, there's going to be a dial you can turn where it brings up lights around the perimeter of it to blow out the Milky Way, so it shows you what light pollution does to the Milky Way. So it's kind of a light pollution exhibit.
Nice.
And what's cool, I want to repeat what I said earlier, I took the picture here. So you cannot get a picture of the Milky Way like that if you're in, again, for example, Los Angeles. So I'm proud of how dark our skies are, and we do a good job. It could be darker, but it's neat that we can take a picture like that here, or pictures, and it's going to be a neat exhibit to show you how light pollution affects stars in the sky. Yeah. Cool. That's all.
Wow.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.